No, it definitely does not. We see this even reflected in Harry's cousins. So, Princess Beatrice and Eugenie, they are not working royals, and yet they also have an HRH in front of their names. Obviously, we do have Prince Andrew, who still is not allowed to use his, much like Harry, but still technically holds an HRH status. And so, really, it's just a styling, but it does sort of mean something in the hierarchy of the royal sphere.
There is a story circulating right now inside the highest levels of the British royal establishment, one so audacious, so breathtakingly presumptuous, that when royal insiders first heard it, the reaction was not fury, it was laughter, disbelieving, incredulous laughter. Because Prince Harry, the man who walked away from the royal family, who has spent years dismantling his connection to the institution brick by brick, apparently briefed a national newspaper with a plan in which his two young children, Archie, who has just turned 6, and Lilibet, who is 3, would one day become working members of the royal family, working royals, as if the door had simply been left open for them, as if none of the last 5 years had happened at all. And Prince William's response? According to sources speaking directly to the Daily Beast, it was swift, decisive, and utterly final. Not only does he have absolutely no intention of allowing Archie and Lilibet to become working royals, he is now reportedly planning to strip the entire Sussex family of their HRH titles the moment he becomes king. Permanently, legally, without appeal. William has reportedly told friends this is not negotiable, and the language being used by those closest to him is striking. Not disappointed, not frustrated, furious. According to one senior source close to the Prince of Wales, when William becomes king, his fury will rain down on Harry and Meghan. These are not the words of a man biding his time and hoping for the best. These are the words of a man who has made a decision. So what exactly is going on? How did we get here? And what does this mean for Archie and Lilibet, 2 children, who have no say in the ambitions being projected onto them by their parents? Tonight, we are going to take you inside the full extraordinary story. The secret briefing that flabbergasted royal insiders, the legal mechanism William is now preparing, the broken promise to the late Queen that set all of this in motion, the Father's Day content that has raised serious questions about whether Harry has finally lost control of his own household, and the devastating verdict from those who know William best that his patience with his brother is not just running thin, it has run out completely, and what comes next will be irreversible. To understand why this story has landed with such force inside royal circles, you need to understand what the HRH title actually means, and crucially, what it does not mean. Because there is a great deal of confusion, some of it deliberately cultivated by the Sussex camp, about what these letters actually confer, Her Royal Highness, His Royal Highness. To the outside world, they sound enormously significant, a badge of royalty, a symbol of belonging to the most famous family on earth. And in one sense, yes, they matter. They carry weight in the hierarchy of the royal sphere. But, in the specific constitutional sense that Harry appears to be banking on, they mean precisely nothing. The gap between the symbolic weight of those 3 letters and their actual legal function is enormous. And Harry, or the people advising him, appear to have confused the two completely. An HRH is a style, a courtesy, a way of addressing someone. It is bestowed by letters patent a legally binding royal decree, and by that same mechanism it can be taken away. What it does not do, and has never done, is confer any official role, any formal rank in the British constitutional system, or any entitlement to public duties, security funding, or a place in the line of active service to the Crown. You can hold an HRH and live an entirely private life. Beatrice and Eugenie do so. The late Princess Margaret's children did so. And crucially, and this is the point that appears to have genuinely flabbergasted people around William, having an HRH as a baby does not give you the right, a decade later, to declare yourself available for working royal duties. It has never worked that way. Not once. Not in any constitutional precedent that anyone at the palace can identify.
Prince William doubles down. According to multiple sources, it's now a matter of when, not if, he strips Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their royal title.
That phrase, a matter of when, not if, is the key to understanding everything that follows. Because this is no longer speculation about what William might do one day if pushed far enough. Sources are using the language of inevitability. The decision in their telling has effectively already been made. What remains is only the timing, the legal mechanism, and the moment William chooses to act. And the Guardian briefing about Archie and Lilibet's working royal future appears by all accounts to have brought that moment considerably closer.
William is planning to act very decisively when he becomes king to take away the titles, the HRHs, once and for all from all non-working royals, which will have the silver lining for him of removing them from Harry and Meghan.
The silver lining framing is important, because it means that when William acts and sources are now very clear that it will not look like a personal vendetta against his brother. It will look like a principled constitutional reform, a slimming down of the monarchy, a clarification of who the working royals are and what the HRH styling actually signifies. Harry and Meghan will lose their titles not as a punishment, framed personally and publicly, but as a consequence of a broader legal change. That, those around William say, is precisely how he intends to handle it, cleanly, constitutionally, without drama, and without giving the Sussexes a grievance they can take to the cameras. The backstory to this moment stretches back to the Sandringham summit of early 2020, the dramatic negotiation between the late Queen Elizabeth, Prince Charles, Prince William, and Harry and Meghan, which resulted in what became known as the Sandringham Agreement. The terms were clear. Harry and Meghan would step back from senior royal duties. They would not use their HRH titles in any commercial capacity. In fact, royal sources have consistently told the Daily Beast that the agreement went further than that Harry and Meghan had agreed not to use the HRH titles at all, in any capacity, not commercially, not privately, not on gift cards, not in personal correspondence, not anywhere. The agreement was, in short, total, and it was made with the late Queen's blessing and authority. The late Queen trusted them to honour that agreement. Those close to her know how much store she set by a person's word, how deeply she believed in the keeping of promises, the honouring of commitments, the principle that when you give your word to someone, especially the Queen, that word is your bond. She had, in the view of those who served her for decades, given Harry and Meghan an extraordinarily generous settlement, one that allowed them to retain their titles, their dignity, their connection to the institution, and a path back should they ever choose to take it. All she asked in return was that they respect the terms, and for a time, at least publicly, it appeared they were doing so. The world watched, the palace exhaled, and then Meghan picked up a pen.
Markle has been very brazen recently with the use of the HRH. In 2020, during the negotiations for Harry and Meghan to leave royal duties, it was agreed with Queen Elizabeth that they will not use the HRH title. That is a long-standing precedent, and there's good reason for it.
What followed, according to those with knowledge of events inside the palace, was a slow, deliberate creep. Not a sudden, dramatic breach, a gradual reassertion of the title that had supposedly been set aside. Correspondence went out carrying the HRH styling. The title appeared in places where it was not supposed to appear, and the Sussex camp's response, when challenged, was to reframe the terms of the original agreement, arguing that the restriction applied only to commercial use, not to all use. Royal sources say that framing is simply false. The agreement was clear, and it is that gap between what was agreed and what is now being claimed that has hardened William's position, to the point where those around him are no longer discussing if he acts, but when. What transformed this from a slow-burning resentment into something much more urgent was the Guardian briefing, because it revealed something that people close to William found deeply troubling, not just the specific claim about working royal status for Archie and Lilibet, but the entire logic behind it. The suggestion appeared to be that despite everything, despite the Netflix documentary, despite Spare, despite the Oprah interview, the estrangement, the years of sustained public attack, Harry and Meghan were operating under the assumption that the titles were still theirs to deploy strategically, that they could selectively honour the Sandringham Agreement when it suited them, and quietly set it aside when it did not. That Archie and Lilibet's HRHs were not a courtesy extended by the Crown, but a right that could be banked, held, and eventually cashed in. To people inside the palace, and those close to William, this was not just presumptuous, it was a direct provocation. One friend of William's told the Daily Beast, It is actually hilarious that no one even noticed it for 10 days until the Mail picked it up. But the laughter did not last long, because underneath the absurdity of the claim lay something that needed to be addressed firmly, legally, and permanently. William had been patient. He had watched. He had waited. He had, by multiple accounts, held back while his father was on the throne, deferring to Charles's instinct to keep a door open. But this, sources say, was a step too far.
Harry and mostly Meghan, it seems, are actually really obsessed with the titles. Meghan and Harry care a lot about those titles, and they say that they don't, but they clearly do.
That obsession, and obsession is not too strong a word, is the thread that runs through everything. They say they don't care about the titles. They say they left because royal life was painful and constraining and damaging to their well-being, and yet Meghan uses the HRH styling she agreed to set aside. Harry's team briefs a newspaper about his children's royal futures. The brand is called Archwell, a name drawn directly from their royal connection. Every product, every venture, every appearance draws its value from the identity they claim to have walked away from. The titles are not incidental to what Harry and Meghan are doing. They are foundational, which is exactly why William's plan to remove them permanently is, to those around him, not just justified but essential. Here is what the Daily Beast is now reporting, and this is significant because the reporting comes from people with direct personal lines to William himself. When William becomes king, he is planning to issue new letters patent that will formally remove the entire Sussex family's right to use the HRH styling, permanently. The mechanism is legally straightforward. Letters patent the same royal decree that bestowed the titles can revoke them. It has been done before. When Diana and Sarah Ferguson had their HRHs removed following their divorces, the rules were quietly changed to remove HRHs from royal ex-wives. There is a distinction, a precedent, and William reportedly intends to use it cleanly, constitutionally, and without drama. The plan, according to sources, would be presented as part of a broader tidying up exercise, a modernising of the royal household appropriate for a new reign. William could stipulate that only working royals are entitled to use the HRH styling, or specify that HRHs extend only to the children of the monarch, not the grandchildren. Either formulation would achieve the same result. The Sussex titles, the source of such calculated exploitation, would be gone, legally, formally, finally. And because it would be framed as part of wider constitutional reform rather than as a personal act, it would be very difficult for anyone to characterize it as vindictive.
This has been Meghan Markle's MO from the beginning. She wants all of the privileges that go along with an identity, but she doesn't want any of the responsibility. She wants the tiara, she doesn't want the public servant.
The tiara without the public servant. It is a line that cuts straight to the heart of everything, because the HRH is not, and has never been, simply an honorific. It is the outward expression of a bargain, the same bargain that has sustained the British monarchy across centuries. You receive prestige, privilege, and a place in the national story. In return, you serve, you show up, you represent, you subordinate yourself to something larger. Meghan entered that bargain, accepted its benefits, and then when the obligations proved inconvenient, walked away from them while attempting to retain the benefits. That, to those inside the institution, is not just a breach of agreement. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of what royalty is.
King Carl Gustaf of Sweden actually stripped the HRH stylings from his grandchildren from his second and third child. So those 7 kids no longer have an HRH. They still have a prince or princess title. They still have dukedoms, but they don't have that HRH styling because they're not working members of the family, or they will not be.
King Carl Gustaf made that decision without anything remotely resembling the kind of sustained provocations William has endured. He simply concluded that a slimmed-down monarchy, in which the HRH styling was reserved for those actively serving, was the right model. William has long shared that view. What the Sussex situation has done is add urgent personal necessity to what might otherwise have been a gradual constitutional evolution. The Guardian briefing transformed a planned long-term reform into an immediate priority. The language that royal sources are now using about William's intentions is notably direct, more direct, those close to the situation say, than anything that has come out of the palace in recent memory. One former courtier with strong ongoing palace connections told the Daily Beast, The bottom line is that Harry and Meghan are abusing the fact that the Queen trusted them to adhere to the deal made at the Sandringham summit. And then came the line that has been circulating quietly among royal watchers ever since. Charles might not want this fight, but William despises Harry and Meghan at this stage, and when he is king, his fury will rain down on them. Those are not the words of someone speculating idly. They are words from someone who has had a conversation with, or is very close to someone who has had a conversation with the Prince of Wales himself. And the word despises is extraordinary. This is not estrangement. It is not disappointment. It is not the weary sadness of a brother who wishes things had been different. It is contempt. Active, present, and growing. With each new episode, each new interview, each new briefing, each new strategic deployment, of the children who were supposedly being protected from exactly this kind of exposure.
I think people would applaud in the streets if it were to happen, because Harry and Meghan, especially Meghan, I think, she does not care about the royal family at all. The only thing she cares about is that she has a title she can lord over her famous friends, because she's not as rich or successful as them, but she does have a royal title, and that's all that matters to her.
That analysis that Meghan's attachment to the HRH styling is not about legacy or principle, but about social currency, about having something to deploy in rooms full of people richer and more successful and more established than she is, resonates deeply with those who have watched this story closely, because it explains something that has always been slightly puzzling. Why, given how loudly both Harry and Meghan have insisted they want nothing to do with royal life, do the titles matter so much? If you have truly walked away, if royal life was so painful, why sign correspondence with HRH? Why build a brand called Archwell, drawn directly from your royal connection, while simultaneously claiming to have escaped the institution? The answer, if Brittany is right, is that the title is the thing. It always was. Everything else is scaffolding. And that is the pattern, isn't it? Look at the record without sentiment. In 2020, Harry and Meghan agreed not to use their HRH titles. Meghan has since used hers. They agreed to step back from royal duties. They have continued to trade, commercially and reputationally, on their royal identities ever since. Harry agreed in the explicit text of his memoir to certain things about his family, and then appeared to breach the spirit of that agreement almost immediately. They have agreed to terms and not honoured them, repeatedly, consistently, in a way that, to those inside the institution, no longer feels accidental or even reckless. It feels deliberate. It feels like strategy.
The truth about Meghan is she will always find a way in which she thinks she can win. And the casualties are irrelevant, whether it's her father, her old best friends, her first husband. There always will be casualties in her life. The question is, when will Harry become the casualty?
There always will be casualties. That is the line that stays with you. Because when you look at the full arc of this story, the father left behind in California, the friends who fell away, the first husband quietly erased from her biography, the royal family dismantled piece by piece in public, you see a pattern that is hard to argue with. And the question Tom Bower poses, when will Harry become the casualty, is one that people close to the situation have been asking for some time. The briefings, the content, the children being deployed. Harry, by multiple accounts, did not want this. And yet here we are. One royal source put it to the Daily Beast with blunt precision. You cannot trust Harry and Meghan. Even if you think you have a deal, you do not really have a deal. And that fundamental breakdown of trust, the palace's hard-won knowledge that any agreement made with the Sussexes is liable to be reinterpreted or quietly ignored when inconvenient, is at the heart of why. William's plan is not just to wait, but to act. To use the legal mechanism available to him and close the door permanently. Because if the door is open, Meghan will keep finding ways to push against it. The only answer is to remove the door entirely. Think about the full progression here. The Sandringham Agreement is reached with the blessing of the late Queen. The HRH titles are supposed to be set aside. Instead, Meghan resumes using hers. Harry briefs a national newspaper about his children's right to decide whether to become working royals, a claim so far outside the terms of any agreement that insiders describe it, in so many words, as trolling. The palace's response escalates from quiet displeasure to active legal planning. And now we are at the point where, according to multiple sources with direct knowledge of the situation, The future King of England is actively preparing the formal removal of his brother's entire family from the HRH system. Each breach has been followed by a greater consequence. And the Sussexes, despite all evidence, appear not to have noticed the direction of travel. Or perhaps they have noticed and simply do not believe it will really happen. Those around William say that would be a very significant miscalculation. Where is Harry in all of this? Because it is easy, watching the relentless narrative management and the strategic deployment of HRH styling, to conclude that this is entirely a Meghan operation, that Harry is simply present, passive, a passenger in a vehicle someone else is driving. And there is evidence for that view. The Father's Day video released recently, carefully produced, beautifully edited, timed almost to the hour after the Princess of Wales and the Wales children had dominated global headlines at Trooping the Colour, bore all the hallmarks of a Meghan content strategy. Not an instinct, a production, something planned and released with the specific intent of reclaiming some of the attention the Wales family had so effortlessly commanded. But Harry signed off on it, and that matters enormously. Because for years, one of the persistent threads in this story was that Harry had drawn a line that whatever else Meghan was doing with the brand and the titles and the Archwell operation, his children would not be paraded publicly, would not be used as content, would not be deployed as commercial assets. He was, insiders claimed, emphatic. The children's faces were hidden, their appearances were rare, and then they were not. The video arrives, the children are fully visible, and Harry, who has absolute authority over his own family, allowed it. Either he agreed, or he was overruled in his own home. Neither option reflects well on the man who once insisted, loudly and repeatedly, that protecting his children was his primary reason for everything he had sacrificed.
Based on one that wants to be out of the public light, doesn't want his children involved, and that's why we see keeping them get the back of their heads, and one that's desperate to utilise that. And utilise the children.
And there is something particularly poignant about Harry's position here, if you look at it clearly and without pity. He is a man who genuinely loved his life in the military, who found real purpose and identity in service, who was, by the admission of people who knew him well, genuinely good at being a working royal at the visits, the charity work, the ability to connect with people from every walk of life in a way that was warm and instinctive and real. Meghan took that away from him, and in its place he has this: Father's Day videos, Instagram reels, the children's faces as the last available currency. He has traded a life of genuine meaning for a life of content creation, and the tragedy is that he appears on some level to know it. So what is the actual strategy here? What are Harry and Meghan trying to achieve by keeping this particular fire burning? Because the Guardian briefing, the claim about Archie and Lilibet's right to decide their own royal future, was not an accident. It was a choice to put that idea into the public domain in a major British newspaper. Someone decided that this was the right moment to plant that flag. But why? What is the end game? What does a future in which Archie and Lilibet are working royals actually look like, and who benefits from keeping that idea alive? The most plausible reading is this: Harry and Meghan are preparing for a future in which their commercial value, already significantly diminished, continues to decline. The Netflix deal was the high watermark. Meghan's lifestyle brand, as ever, has had a tepid reception. With Love, Meghan was not the cultural moment she had hoped for. The philanthropic ventures have raised questions rather than answering them. And the brutal reality of being a celebrity without a clear lane, not an actress, not a working royal, not a businesswoman with a proven track record, is that the shelf life is brutally short. Unless you have something irreplaceable, something that cannot be replicated. And the thing Harry and Meghan have that literally no one else in the world has is their children's royal titles and royal identity.
As her clout dwindled, as people lost interest in what she and Harry had going on, she was going to move to the next generation. That was the final card she had to play, Archie and Lilibet.
The final card. That framing is chilling when you sit with it, because it implies there is nothing left after this one. No further move, no alternative strategy, just the children. And specifically, the idea that those children carry within them a royal identity that has lasting commercial and social value that can be slowly, carefully monetized over the coming years, long after the world has stopped paying attention to whatever Meghan's latest project happens to be. The working royal claim is not about Archie and Lilibet's future happiness or freedom to choose. It is about keeping the door ajar, keeping the royal identity active, keeping the brand alive beyond its natural expiry date. And that, sources say, is precisely why William's plan to remove the titles entirely is so important. Not just as a constitutional tidying up exercise, not just as the conclusion of a 5-year dispute about a broken agreement, but as a specific, deliberate dismantling of the strategy itself. Because once the titles are gone, once Archie and Lilibet carry no HRH, once Harry and Meghan carry no HRH, the foundation of the entire long game collapses. The children's royal identity, which is the last and most valuable card in the Sussex hand, ceases to exist as a commercial proposition. And what is left without it is simply a family in Montecito, living off diminishing returns, with no institutional connection left to trade on. That is the endgame William is preparing, and it is far more strategically devastating than it might appear. Let us be very precise about what the Sussexes have told the world and what the record actually shows, because the gap between the two is, at this point, quite extraordinary. Meghan has spoken at length in interviews, in her Netflix documentary, through her public platforms about the fundamental importance of privacy, about the pain of public scrutiny, about her fierce determination to protect her children from the pressures of royal and celebrity life. These are not passing remarks. They are central planks of the entire Sussex public narrative. The reason they left, we have been told repeatedly, is that they wanted privacy, space, a normal life, the chance to raise their children away from cameras and commentary. And yet, Harry's team briefs a national newspaper about his children's potential future as working royals, placing Archie and Lilibet at the very centre of royal succession conversation. Meghan posts carefully produced video content featuring the children with increasing frequency. The children's names are attached to candles, commercial products, the Archwell brand. And now, in an interview about her parenting philosophy, Meghan speaks warmly about her children's farmers market stand, their little vegetable garden, their learning about the value of money, the kind of wholesome, relatable parenting content that Catherine and William have always embodied organically, without effort, without a production team. The kind of content that Meghan, according to every account of who she was before she entered the royal world, has never previously expressed the slightest authentic interest in.
When you think about Meghan, I see somebody who's sort of, you could say, cosmopolitan. She doesn't really like the countryside. She doesn't really like to get dirty. She doesn't like to get into the muck. And we see that even when Meghan did a supposed vegetable haul, like they were all perfect. And that she posted on Instagram. And so for me, I think, yes, people can evolve what they enjoy, but Meghan, of course, is hyper focused on the royals. And I think Meghan always feels this massive inferiority complex. And so she's always trying to compete with Catherine in whatever way that she can.
The inferiority complex point keeps surfacing, unprompted, when people who have studied Meghan carefully try to explain what is actually driving her behavior. Not ambition in the abstract. There are plenty of ambitious people in public life who do not behave as Meghan behaves, but something more specific. A comparison she cannot escape and apparently cannot stop trying to win. A woman who knows that in every room she enters, in every publication that covers her, in every conversation about royal grace and royal purpose, there is a measuring stick. And no matter how many farmers' markets she sets up in her Montecito garden, no matter how many lifestyle brands she launches, that measuring stick is the Princess of Wales. And the distance between them has not closed. If anything, it has grown. But step back from the adult drama for a moment, because there is a dimension to this story more consequential than titles or PR strategy, or the long-running war between the Sussexes and the palace. Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor is 6 years old. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor is 3. They have no say in any of this. None whatsoever. They did not choose to be born into the world's most scrutinized family. They did not choose to have their names attached to commercial brands and lifestyle ventures. They did not choose to appear in curated social media content or to have their potential futures as working royals briefed to national newspapers on their behalf. They are children, and the decisions being made about their public identity right now, by the adults who are supposed to protect them, will shape the rest of their lives. There is a comparison that invites itself here, and it is not a comfortable one. William and Catherine's children, Prince George, who is 11, Princess Charlotte, who is 10, and Prince Louis, who is 7, have been raised in a way that balances their royal identity with their right to simply be children. They appear at official events. They are seen, but they are also, unmistakably, children. They pull faces. They wave with enormous enthusiasm. They occasionally cause entirely charming chaos on a ceremonial tarmac. And when Catherine and William are with them publicly, both parents are fully present, engaged, warm, unmediated, no production team visible, no carefully timed release. The contrast with what arrives from Montecito is, to those watching closely, almost painful.
Catherine and William are highly engaged parents. We see this reflected, whereas Harry and Meghan, they just give us these little tidbits, and you just got to wonder, who are the kids with the rest of the time? Because like Link said, Meghan is more than willing to fly off to New York overnight just to go to a play. And most moms don't do that.
And underneath the parenting question lies a harder one still. If William strips the Sussex family of their HRH titles, as sources say he firmly intends to do, what does that mean for Archie and Lilibet as they grow into young adults? They will be the children of a duke and duchess, with no formal royal styling of their own, no HRH, no pathway to working royal status. And they will have to build their lives, their identities, their sense of who they are in the shadow of one of the most dramatic and public estrangements in modern royal history. That is an extraordinary inheritance to give a child. Not the titles, not even the wealth, the shadow. And every decision their parents are making right now is making that shadow heavier. The palace's official position, as always, is silence. No comment on the Daily Beast reporting. No confirmation or denial of William's plans. No public statement on the HRH question. And that restraint is itself significant, not as a sign that nothing is happening, but as a sign that the palace has decided this battle will be fought through legal mechanisms and constitutional action, not through the press. Because when the palace wants to knock down a story when something is genuinely untrue, it tends, eventually, to say so. Quietly, through trusted channels, but it says so. The silence here is, to those who understand how the institution communicates, less a denial and more a confirmation of the general direction of travel. They are not saying it is not happening. They are simply saying nothing at all. What the palace has done, consistently throughout this entire chapter of royal history, is manage the Sussex situation at careful arm's length, remaining publicly dignified in the face of extraordinary provocation, and allowing William and King Charles to signal their positions through people they trust to speak on background. The friends of William who spoke to Tom Sykes at the Daily Beast are people who know William personally, people whose access to him is real and sustained, and people who would not speak in this way without some awareness that doing so reflects the general mood of the man they serve.
King Charles is turning a blind eye, but King William won't.
King Charles is turning a blind eye, but King William won't. 6 words that contain the entire story. Charles is a father first. He is a man who still, somewhere in the private part of himself, hopes for a reconciliation. He has been reluctant to strip titles, reluctant to cut formal ties, reluctant to permanently close the door. But William does not share that reluctance. The patience that Charles extends is not something William recognizes as useful. And when William is king, which, depending on how circumstances unfold, may not be as far away as it once seemed, the calculus changes completely. And with it, the future of the Sussex family's connection to the institution they claim to have left behind. There is a broader warning in this story that goes well beyond HRH titles and the Sussex family specifically. It is about what happens when someone treats an institution built on trust, on honour, on the solemn keeping of one's word, as a resource to be extracted rather than a tradition to be honoured. Because what Harry and Meghan have done, whether consciously or not, is treat the royal family as a bank. A vast bank of prestige and history and public goodwill from which they could make withdrawal after withdrawal titles, access, security, narrative, the reflected glow of centuries of institutional authority without making a single deposit. Without the service, the duty, the self-effacement, the grinding, unglamorous work of representing something larger than yourself. Royal institutions survive because the people inside them understand the implicit bargain struck across generations. You receive extraordinary privilege, and in return you give extraordinary service. You set aside your private preferences, your personal grievances, your individual ambitions, and you serve, not on your own terms. Not with a carefully curated Instagram feed showing the best 30 seconds of your engagement. You serve because service is the thing. Harry was raised to understand this. By all accounts, he understood it well for the first 30 years of his life. And then something changed. Something, or someone. The royal family has been extraordinarily patient with the Sussexes, patient beyond what most institutions would have been. Patient in a way that some inside it have privately questioned, wondering whether patience has been mistaken for weakness. Whether the restraint that royal dignity demands has inadvertently given Harry and Meghan the impression that there are no real consequences, that the crown will absorb whatever is thrown at it and continue to offer the same courtesy indefinitely. William's plan, if it proceeds as sources describe, would be the clearest possible signal that this impression is wrong, that the patience is exhausted, that the era in which the Sussexes could rely on the crown's silence to give them cover is drawing, definitively, to a close. And there is something almost tragic in the fact that it has come to this, because it did not have to. Harry, as those who knew him before Meghan will tell you, was genuinely well suited to royal life. He had the instincts, the warmth, the ability to make people feel seen that the best working royals possess. There was a version of this story, a version that was entirely within his reach, in which he remained in service, found his lane, built something meaningful within the institution, and perhaps eventually found a way to expand its boundaries in ways that reflected who he actually is. That version of the story is gone, irrecoverably, at this point, and the version that replaced it, the titles dispute, the children as content, the fury of a brother who once sat with him through the darkest times, is a poor substitute by any measure. Where does this leave the relationship between Harry and William? That question now carries a kind of grief with it, because these were brothers, not just brothers in the formal, aristocratic sense, but brothers in the fullest human meaning of that word. Two boys who lost their mother at an age when loss like that leaves marks that never fully heal, who were bound together by shared grief and a shared understanding of what it meant to grow up inside an institution that loved them and constrained them simultaneously. William was the one who, reportedly, when Harry's struggles became serious in his 20s, the searching, the absence of direction sat with him and made sure he got help. That is not the relationship of people bound only by accident of birth. That is something deep. Or it was. The Daily Beast's reporting uses the word despises, not frustrated, not saddened, not estranged, despises. And if that word is accurate, and these are people with direct personal knowledge speaking on background, in all but name then, the relationship between the brothers has moved into territory from which return may be genuinely impossible. Not because of one incident or one betrayal, but because of the relentless accumulation, the Netflix documentary, the Oprah interview, the memoir, the ongoing use of titles that were supposed to have been set aside, and now the working royal briefing. The briefing about Archie and Lilibet that, to people who care about the institution, was not merely provocative but contemptuous. And what does reconciliation even look like from here? At minimum, it would require Harry and Meghan to stop using the HRH titles, to honour the Sandringham Agreement in full and in good faith, to stop briefing newspapers about their children's royal futures, to acknowledge, in some concrete and demonstrable way, that the last 5 years of sustained attack on William, on Catherine, on the institution, caused real and lasting harm. That is an enormous ask. And there is no sign, not a flicker, not a whisper that either Harry or Meghan is anywhere near willing to make it, in which case William's path is clear, and it ends in only one place. The most extraordinary part of all of this is how avoidable it was, even after the Oprah interview, even after the Netflix documentary, even after Spare. There were still, in the view of people close to the palace, paths back, narrow ones, requiring significant humility and significant sacrifice of the Sussex public narrative, but paths. William, for all his reported fury, is not a man who acts from spite. He is a man who acts from principle. And the principle, for him, is the institution. If Harry and Meghan had shown, at any point, a genuine willingness to honour the agreements they had made, and to cease the ongoing exploitation of titles and identity they had supposedly relinquished, people close to William believe some form of accommodation might still have been possible. Instead, they briefed The Guardian, and that, those around William say, was the last chance gone. Step all the way back and look at the full picture, not just this story, not just this week, but the whole arc of it from the beginning. 5 years ago, Harry and Meghan left the royal family with what appeared to be an extraordinary hand. Royal titles, global name recognition on a scale that no amount of money could buy, a Netflix deal, a Spotify deal, a Penguin Random House deal, public sympathy, in significant quarters, that was genuine and warm and real. They had options that almost no one on earth has ever had, and they have, through strategic miscalculation, chronic overestimation of their own independent appeal, and a fundamental failure to understand that the thing that made people fascinated by them was precisely the royal connection they were simultaneously exploiting and undermining. They have squandered almost all of it. The Netflix deal produced content that was not a cultural hit by any serious measure. The Spotify deal collapsed. The memoir created enemies on every front. The philanthropic ventures have been plagued by questions about governance and impact. The lifestyle brand is, at best, a work in progress with an uncertain future. And now, with the revelation that William reportedly despises them, that he is planning to strip their titles the moment he wears the crown, and that the briefing about Archie and Lilibet's royal future has been described by people close to the Prince of Wales as beyond parody. Even for them, the picture is bleaker than it has ever been. What is remarkable, looking at it clearly, is how much of this was self-inflicted. The royal family did not set out to destroy the Sussexes. It set out to manage them to find, as the Sandringham Agreement showed, some workable accommodation between what Harry and Meghan wanted and what the institution could offer. That accommodation was rejected, then accepted, then honoured in name only, then quietly dismantled from the inside. At every turn, when the institution extended something patience, courtesy, the generous terms of the settlement, the Sussexes found a way to test it, push against it, or simply ignore it. And now, as a direct consequence, they find themselves looking at a future in which the last remaining thing of genuine value in their public offering, the royal connection, the HRH styling, the children's place in the royal story is about to be formally, legally, permanently removed, not as an act of malice, as an act of constitutional common sense, long overdue.
Harry and the kids are, of course, going to be traded off that, and so Harry has a lot of opportunity to look forward to this in the future because this is their future. He's basically given up on having any sort of real job. He's not bringing in the money. She kind of sort of is, or attempting to. And so they got nothing. They got nothing but the kids, and to sell the kids basically to the highest bidder, which for Meghan is Instagram.
Nothing but the kids, and to sell the kids to the highest bidder, which for Meghan is Instagram. What is left after that? The titles, for as long as they last, and the evidence strongly suggests they will not last long, and the slowly but unmistakably diminishing fascination of a public that is increasingly watching not in admiration or sympathy, but in something quieter, something closer to sorrowful astonishment. The feeling you get when you watch someone making the same mistake again and again with escalating consequences and apparently no capacity for reflection, that is where we are. And William, when the time comes, will act, not in fury, not in haste, but with the quiet, deliberate, constitutional precision of a man who has made his peace with what has to be done. The titles will go. The door will close. And what remains for Harry and Meghan after that, what their children inherit from all of this, that is a question nobody, right now, can quite bring themselves to answer. Before we go tonight, I want to ask you something, because I know this story touches a great many of you very personally. When you look at Archie and Lilibet, 6 and 3 years old, their identities already being shaped by decisions they have no part in making, what do you genuinely think their future looks like? And do you believe, hand on heart, that Harry truly understands what is being done in his children's names? Or has he simply become someone who no longer has the will, or perhaps the capacity, to stop it? I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so very much for spending this time with me today. Truly, your presence here, your loyalty, your passion for these stories means more than I can adequately say. If you found today's video worthwhile, please do give it a like. It takes a single second and makes an enormous difference in helping more people find this channel. If you are not already subscribed, please hit that button now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. And if you know someone who would want to hear this full story, please do share it with them. Until tomorrow, take very good care of yourselves.